Hi, and welcome back to Beans and Bezels. I've already reviewed two watches from this interesting new microbrand based in Germany. Vandaag launched their brand with the Schallmauer, a quartz-based chronograph, which is one of the cleanest dials I've seen in a sub $1,000 watch. The next watch was the Primus, a minimalist quartz dress watch. On both occasions, I was very impressed with the design and finishing of these watches and hope to see an automatic watch join their ranks. Vandaag recently launched their line of automatic dive watches called Tiefsee, which translates to deep sea. The Tiefsee retails at around $360 on the nylon strap and just over $400 on the metal bracelet. The sub $500 watch market has a lot to offer to the customer right now, and in my opinion is one of the most competitive areas on the microbrand landscape. Let's take a look at the Tiefsee and see if it's worth adding to your list of potential dive watches for around $400. The case measures 41.5mm in diameter, 48mm from lug to lug, and 12.3mm tall. The case silhouette is a tonneau shape but has a lot of interesting surfaces that combine sharp angles and smooth surfaces. I love the case design and I think the result is a watch that plays with light beautifully and is also comfortable on the wrist. The mid case has a narrow and flat top surface that dramatically curves down into a pair of short lugs. This is clearly inspired by a lot of vintage dive watch cases and I love it. The quality of brushing on all these surfaces is excellent for the money. The lug width is 22mm, which is appropriate for the case design. You then have a 120 click unidirectional bezel that is entirely polished and has a very good grip. The insert is polished ceramic and, as you would expect, adds to the light show that this watch puts on. There isn't any lume on the bezel unfortunately, but the quality of the filled markers is excellent. The clicks are loud and tactile, but there is a little bit of backplay, roughly 1/3 of a click's worth. Not a deal breaker by any means, but an area for Vandaag to improve upon on their next watch. There is a screw-down crown at the 3 o'clock position that is modestly sized. My one and only real issue with this watch is the crown. I wish they had a slightly larger crown and one with a bit more friction to grip. The ridges actually look fairly deep, but I think the polishing may have made the crown a bit too smooth. Unscrewing the crown doesn't take much effort, but getting the last few turns in when screwing it back in does. Again, a slight inconvenience, but not a deal breaker. Flipping it over, you have a screw-down case back with a sapphire crystal exhibition window that gives you a good look at the miyota 821A movement. This watch is rated for up to 200 meters of water resistance. Both the Schallmauer and the Primus had very well designed dials that had impressive attention to detail and finishing. The Tiefsee is no different and shows off Vandaag's ability to make bold design decisions too. And by bold, I'm primarily referring to how they've managed to design a dive watch dial that is extremely restrained and minimal, but yet manages to retain all dive watch functionality. The base of the dial has a fine media blasted finish that is painted with a subtle and matte blue color. The brand's name is printed under the 12 o'clock position and there is some text above the 6 o'clock position. The quality of printing, as with all Vandaag watches, is exceptional. There is a dark blue chaptering with white ticks for every minute or seconds increment and Arabic numerals for every increment of 5. I like that the Made in Germany text is printed on the chaptering and not on the dial. While most microbrands choose to follow in the footsteps of Rolex with large circular or rectangular applied indices, the Tiefsee is closer in appearance to the Blancpain bathyscaphe. These indices are small but very well polished and generously filled with lume. The polishing on these indices is excellent with no finishing anomalies and has a similar diamond-like glimmer to that of the Blancpain. Great stuff here both in terms of design and quality control. There is a circular date window at the 6 o'clock position. I'm a huge fan of 6 o'clock windows because of the overall dial symmetry. Vandaag incorporated their signature red date wheel and I think it looks fantastic. In keeping with this restrained design approach, the handset chosen is very simple. The hour and minute hands are polished and generously filled with lume. The proportions are good and I think it works for the minimal aesthetic. The seconds hand is similar to what you'd find on a dress watch, which is another design element that confirms this watch's dressy diver DNA. The hand is polished well but lacks lume. The finishing across the entire dial is excellent. For $400, you don't often find dials that are this clean and meticulous. The design is familiar yet different. The empty space between elements reminds me again of the Blancpain, but I think Vandaag took that one step further by adding a German minimalist twist to this design. The dial seems to combine both a flashy dress watch appearance with a utilitarian dive watch layout. I'm a fan. If you've read my review of the Vandaag Schallmauer, you'll know that I was very impressed with the lume on that watch, and they've once again decided to use Japanese Luminova from Nemoto & Co. The hour and minute hands are very generously filled with lume and the circular applied indices are also lumed, and both of these elements are very bright and have excellent longevity. I think the quality and quantity of lume used will make a lot of folks happy. I would have liked to see lume on the bezel, even if it was just the triangular marker at the 12 o'clock position. Additionally, the current high-polished dressy seconds hand design makes lume application impossible. I would typically complain about this, but I'll take the dressy aesthetic over lume in this case. I'm a bracelet guy, so if a watch has a bracelet and it's affordable, I'm going to get it. and unless the bracelet is ripping hair off my wrist, I'm likely going to wear that bracelet until either the watch or I cease to exist. That said, not all bracelets are created equally, and the level of quality and functionality drastically varies where clasps are concerned. Vandaag did not cut corners with their bracelet and clasp. The links are very solid and are fastened together by means of screw-based pins. They also include the screwdriver and link changing tool with your watch, and I always appreciate when brands do this. The clasp system is entirely milled and feels very robust. The clasp is quite compact, but this design decision only provides three micro adjustment slots. This hasn't been a problem for me as I've adjusted it to stay on the second slot and move it one position on either side if my wrist expands or contracts. The bracelet also has quick release pins so that you can quickly swap between the metal bracelet and your other straps. The bracelet and case joint is excellent. The end links mate the case perfectly, and there's no horizontal or vertical wiggle. Overall, at roughly $400, you cannot ask for more from this bracelet. I think the choice of movement might stir up some debate as the Tiefsee uses a miyota 821A. A lot of watch enthusiasts associate this movement with being a less accurate, non-hacking version of the 9 series. But Miyota has made some upgrades to this movement a few years ago, and this movement now offers hacking and can be regulated to be reasonably accurate too. For a $360 watch, this choice of movement is appropriate, and considering how much this watch delivers in other areas such as dial finishing, a sapphire crystal, a ceramic bezel, and excellent lume. Other watches in this category using this movement are the Baltic HMS and the Laco Augsburg 39 that I recently reviewed. In terms of tidiness and clean assembly, I think it's safe to expect excellent quality control from Vandaag. The movement is clean with little or no dust particles. I logged the accuracy of this watch over a 4-day period and observed roughly plus 6 seconds per day. The watch seemed to start off losing a lot of time but settled into the plus 5 seconds per day range fairly quickly. Pretty good numbers from a Miyota 821A in my opinion. The 41.5mm diameter is on the larger side of watches that I typically wear, but the 48mm lug-to-lug width helps it sit very comfortably on my 6¼ inch wrist. The compact wrist presence is made possible because of the very clever lug and case design. The mid-case dramatically curves down towards the wrist, and the perceived lug-to-lug width is closer to how a 46 or 47mm watch would wear. The case height is 12.3mm and the watch is well balanced. On the metal bracelet size for my wrist, this watch weighs roughly 160 grams. So it's not a very lightweight watch, but feels appropriate for a robust dive watch. While this is a 200-meter water-resistant dive watch, the polished ceramic bezel insert, polished bezel, and almost diamond-like polished indices put on quite a show. And the high-polished handset just adds to this unconventional, dressy diver appearance. I actually love it, and the stereotype that German tool watches are almost always subdued or lackluster in design clearly does not apply here. So to wrap things up, am I convinced that this watch should go onto your list of dive watches in the $350 to $400 range? Absolutely. I say this because the design, build quality, and finishing is on the upper 95% of watches that I've owned and reviewed in this category. Where this watch falls a bit short is in the slippery crown, and maybe the slight bezel backplay if you're very sensitive to that. In terms of movement, you might find other brands offering you Miyota 9 series movements for $50 to $100 more, like the Zelos Mako or Horizons. But I'd have to say that the quality of dial finishing here is a step above the Mako that I recently reviewed. And while I wasn't sold on the Miyota 821A on the Baltic HMS, I'm completely okay with it in this watch, like I was on the Augsburg 39. I think this watch definitely earns its value in all the other categories, so if you're willing to give a new microbrand a chance and you like what this watch looks like, add it to your list. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to read the full length review in the link below.